The book actually ends with telling the story of like, well, how do they define success? And it is in part an emotional survival strategy to say, well, success can't be home ownership anymore. Guess what? Like success can't be college. Success has to be, I didn't have friends when I got here and now I do. My mom was hungry when I left and now she's not. Like the marker of success has to move so that they can cope with the everyday suffering and the pain of the experience of being unaccompanied and undocumented.
This is going to try to transition into my next question, but I'm curious, it's important for my audience to know.
Mm-hmm.
What are these unaccompanied minors, children, leaving? What is so bad there that even being here and basically having your wages garnished or not getting paid at all and struggling to eat or maybe even find a place to sleep, what are they escaping that isn't so bad?
Yeah. I talk in the book about extreme poverty and everyday violence, like legal violence, and also illegal forms of violence against young people that cut their future short. So when we talk about young people losing out on their childhood, they were losing out on their childhood when they were 2, 3, 4 years old, right? In the origin country, there was one young person that I interviewed who told me he started shining shoes in Guatemala City at the age of 3. And that was his job, and his sister had another job, and the mom had another job. So it wasn't that he was following his mom around shining, that was his job. So young people are leaving behind some of the highest rates of extreme poverty globally, but in sort of rural parts of Central America and Mexico today as well. That is the reality, that young people have been working alongside their families or sometimes alone to overcome extreme poverty. And young people tell me in interviews that they remember their mothers crying that they didn't have, out of guilt, that they didn't have enough food to go around for the 4 or 5 siblings at the table. That there would be up one piece of meat and each sibling would take a bite of a piece of meat and that would hold them over for the week.
Wow.
Yeah. And in terms of the violence, we hear about it constantly, maybe not in the way it should be framed historically and with serious context, especially in terms of the US's role in creating the violence. But
ladies and gentlemen, you hear what Dr. Steph said? She just backed up what I've been saying that I said a couple of weeks ago, that Americans don't want to talk about our involvement in Central and South America in the 20th century, throughout the 20th century. Absolutely. How we just destroyed governments and put people in place that maybe were corrupt.
Yeah. Yes. And while telling Americans, like, it's for our safety, they're communists, right? Like the fear of communist spread in the Western Hemisphere, and funding millions of dollars per day governments that were repressing, persecuting, in Guatemala, full-on genocide of indigenous communities that were organizing against their repression and the privatization of their land for U.S. corporate profit. Right. And I mean, I tell my students, what you need to know is that the U.S. was funding militaries that were enacting scorched earth campaigns where they would light villages on fire from the outside in so people couldn't escape. And that freed up the land. And then they were, next thing you know, private markets, right? Yeah. So the U.S. has its hand in destabilizing the economy, the governments, and the social infrastructure of these countries. So kids are coming of age, and I really talk about it as kids are coming of age in societies where they can't imagine their futures. Sure, they're unauthorized, unaccompanied migrants. They're also just kids thinking about their futures, right?
Yeah.
So when they're facing extreme violence and poverty, and they've been working at the ages of 3, 4, 5, 6 in their origin countries, they come to the US, right? I talk in the book about one young person who was sewing tracksuits for Adidas at home in his living room in Guatemala. So when he comes to the US and he works at a garment factory, he's like, oh, I'm not doing it by hand. This is mobility, right? Like this is
Right.
skill, this is
Wow.
technology, this is advancement, because he remembers how tedious it was to sew the Adidas logo on these track jackets.
Wow.
So it's things like that, right? I'm not working in the field. Now I'm a fruit packer. So that looks like improvement. But it's a job that any average American walking down the street would say, absolutely, I'm not taking that, right?
Right. If you like that clip, go ahead and hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe to catch up on all of our latest content. Don't forget to hit the notifications button when you do subscribe so you can get updated every time we release content. We release content every day, whether it's an actual show or clips from the shows. So go ahead and subscribe, like, comment. Also, don't forget our Patreon page where you can find our Talking Straight-ish and After Hours Uncensored episodes. That's patreon.com/Unsolicited Perspectives. But once again, thank you again for listening to Unsolicited Perspectives. I'm your host, Bruce Anthony, and I'm going to catch you next time. I'll holla.